Before we can apply fascia, gutter, hip, ridge, valley trim to our roof, we have to define it so that it appears in our database, in our list of materials to be applied to the roof. Often seen as an onerous task, it's actually quite simple. The difficult part of the whole thing is to have all the information you need easily at hand. First thing we do is set up flashings, determine what category of flashing that we're going to define, specify the supplier. Supplier would typically be the guy who makes this stuff for you or supplies it to you. It might be your own workshop. The finish, as is the same with metal panels, the finish on trim is defined in the same way. If you specify colour, coloured or painted, the software will prompt you for a colour when you use it. Any other specification, as is the case here with CB representing ColourBond, you will not be prompted for a colour. So anything other than colour, coloured or painted, you will not be prompted for a colour. The fastener code will be the fastener for this particular product, and it will have previously been defined under fasteners. The product code for fasteners, as is the product code for your trim, would typically be the same product code as is used by your supplier. This will reduce confusion at time of ordering. Most important thing is to have a description that is meaningful but not too long. Long-winded descriptions clutter the order form and run into other columns and messing up your order form. When you're defining product codes, ensure that you do not use any special characters. A special character is essentially anything that you use when you go shift numeral. So anything above any of the numerals on the keyboard, hashes, percent signs, ampersands, tildes, anything, star, anything like that, do not use those in a product code. The maximum length will be determined by typically what you can transport. So if you're roll forming cut to length, up to whatever the maximum length is, let's say it was 8 meters or 12 feet, that's what you can fit on your truck, well then that will be your maximum length. If you work with stock lengths of 10 or 20 feet, then maximum length will be 20 feet. The gauge is not used for anything other than information, but it's also a method of when you select the item, you can sort by gauge. Costing method will typically be on a per length basis or per unit length, either per foot or per metre, and then it's whatever the cost is per unit. So in this case, $120 per length. The most important thing to get correct with these defining flashings is to understand precisely how the estimation method is applied. It's very literal. The software does precisely what it says it will do here. Depending on whether you cut to length or order in stock lengths, you must use the correct method of estimation to get the right cutting list for your situation. So read these carefully and make sure you select the appropriate way. In Australia and New Zealand, typically you would divide each run up to maximum length. In this case, it will divide the length by up to whatever the maximum length is. So if I was to say the maximum length is 8 meters and I want to split each run up to the maximum length, I will get multiples up to 8 meters long. If you're in the US or Canada, in the northern parts of America, you might then split each run into stock length pieces, and the stock lengths are determined by the stock length table. So you can define a stock length table for any multiples of any lengths, and that is determined by what is supplied to you. Most trim in North America is supplied in multiples of 10 foot. Now let me select a flashing here, I'll select by type and I will select fascia. So we need to talk now about accessories. So I'm going to select this fascia here. Now when you supply trims such as fascia, gutter, the accessory items become quite complicated. So when you supply fascia and gutter to complete a roof, in this case fascia alone, you would typically require fascia brackets, external corners, internal corners, stop ends and pops and other special treatments, and accessories that are required to install this particular item. The software wants to know the product code. The product code needs to be unique, but the product code might be common amongst a range of items. The finish, the same applies. If you put coloured or painted, it will ask you for a colour, otherwise it will just use whatever the designation is. Items per box, well, typically however they're supplied to you, and the cost per item. In the case of brackets, then you will need to specify the frequency that the brackets are supplied, and in this case we can have spaced along the flashing. At every 600 I want to get a fascia bracket. If you put 0, then the software uses the rafter spacing as defined when you create your model under the roof defaults. Because that is often forgotten, some customers prefer to preset the fascia bracket spacing. The worst that can happen is you end up with too many brackets on site and you have to bring them back and use them on the next job. But whatever item you select, there are a range of methods of associating that accessory item with the flashings. So typically in this case an external corner would be per external corner 90 degrees. But notice we can have an external corner for a 135 degree corner as well, or indeed for any other angle. There are a multitude of ways of associating items with the particular trim, and think about this when you select it. Every option that you need to correctly associate an accessory with a flashing is available to you to be selected. Notice also that we can have different fasteners for timber frame, different fasteners for steel frame. And an accessory can be a material item indicated by the M, or a labour item if there's some sort of special treatment, and in this case a special treatment for a joint. Once you've defined your accessories, you hit OK. Now once the flashing and the accessories are defined, if it's a new item you select Add. If we're simply updating an existing item, for example changing the price, then we hit Update. Most important of all, the record for this particular flashing is not added to the list until you press OK. So if you select the red button up here, it quits from the process without saving. It's essential that you hit OK. So very quickly, type of flashing, supplier, finish and fastener code. Fasteners can be defined as an accessory or defined as a fastener, a quick and simple way, defined right here. The description is whatever the description is for that item so that it's easily found, and the product code is the product code typically of your supplier. Key to the correct quantity of material is the estimation method. Read it and read it carefully and apply the correct method. Accessories must be defined for each of the categories of material, and notice that the software is aware that the accessories for fascia by itself might be different from fascia when it's used with a gutter. So that's the quick overview. For more details, we will be producing a much more detailed presentation in terms of defining fascia and gutter and what have you for your roof. Now that it's applied, it can be applied to the roof.